From the nation's capital in Washington, D.C., Cole on Congress. The program discussing national issues that affect Oklahoma. Your host, U.S. Representative Tom Cole.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Cole on Congress. My guest today really needs no introduction. Cathy Keating's service as First Lady of Oklahoma is admired not only in our state, but nationwide. Cathy's experience in charity work includes service to the Oklahoma City National Memorial, the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation, the American Red Cross, just to name a few, and the Cowboy Hall of Fame and National Western Heritage Center now. In honor of her outstanding public service, Cathy was recently inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. Cathy, and I'm not going to call you Cathy. It said that in the opening. I have to always call you First Lady. So
okay, Congressman.
No, you call me Tom, but you are always First Lady. I couldn't call you anything but First Lady any more than I would call Governor Keating Frank. I mean, he is the governor and you are the First Lady. But it's just been a delight that you would agree to appear with us and join us today.
Well, it's just an honor for me to be here. I know typically you have congressmen and women on your show and you talk about national issues, but there's no issue that is more important to me than home in America, and so I'm tickled to death to be here with you, and you may always call me Cathy. I will always be Cathy to you, and we really do, both Frank and I really appreciate the service that you have given to the state of Oklahoma, to Frank, and now to the state of Oklahoma and the United States of America.
Oh, you're always gracious. I usually start these things off with something personal about the guest, and I have so many things that I could say, and I'm sure some of them will work their way into the conversation. But I do want to share with our audience one particular. It's one of my favorites, and it was not too long, honestly, after the tragedy of the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, your leadership, of course, was remarkable throughout that. The memorial service, the way you pulled the state together and healed, and then afterwards the yeoman's work you and the governor did in setting up a scholarship fund and relief efforts for the victims. It's really one of those terrible dark chapters where wonderful things came out because the right people, that is you and the governor, were there to lead us. But as you know, I'm an old political hack, and we were curious as to what the governor's numbers would be after that. We knew he had led so well, he'd be very popular, and so we waited until July and went into the field and decided we would just take a look and see whether he was popular or not. And we happened to stick your name on the survey because you had emerged, you'd already been a substantial public figure in the refurnishing of the mansion, all those sorts of things. So we thought, well, gosh, I wonder how Cathy's doing. And I remember when the survey came back, I went to the governor's office and I said, Governor, I've got good news and bad news. He said, well, what's the good news? And I said, Keating is the most popular political name in Oklahoma. And he said, well, what could be bad? And I said, you're not the Keating. Because you were like off the charts popular. And you stayed that way all the way through. I mean, and the governor had a contentious governorship in many ways. I think a very productive one, a very good one, because he took on big issues, whether it was right to work or the largest privatization effort in state history when we turned University Hospital into a private institution. A lot of things that were controversial, but your popularity never waned with Oklahoma voters, ever.
Well, I used to always say, and I know, Tom, you've heard me say this many times before, I really had the better of the two jobs because, you and Frank were, leading the state, down a new road, a new path with new hope and new vision for tomorrow, and doing all those things in the public arena that cause people to either agree or disagree with you. And if you're going to lead, you should be doing that. You want people to stand up and have an opinion. And I was in the private sector going around to the communities doing what the public sector either couldn't do because we didn't have money or they shouldn't have done. And so I was doing all the fun stuff, and I was working with people all across our state to build our communities and make a difference in people's lives. And it was a great experience. Probably the number one job I'll ever have in my life.
Well, you didn't make a dime, and you worked like a dog. So I'm not sure that was the best job ever. Again, the staff used to marvel at the hours you would keep and the miles you would travel. And honestly, from our standpoint as a state, what an extraordinarily superb image you put on outside of Oklahoma. I think really you and the governor, obviously a defining moment was the Oklahoma City bombing, but in that moment people saw quality and grace, and I remember, I believe it was ABC News, you and the governor were People of the Week or something like that, but it actually made you a wonderful ambassador, spokesperson, image for Oklahoma for your entire time. And then honestly, the things that you did at the mansion when we had people coming to Oklahoma thinking about putting together businesses in Oklahoma, the opportunities, really the level of entertainment. I remember once, this wasn't an industrial group, but we had a group of members of the Royal War College at Sandhurst that were coming, and they were both British and from the Commonwealth. And these were all people that were picked because they thought at some point they would be the leaders of their militaries, and or as the counselor put it to me, some of them may well be the dictators of their country. So these are very important people. But one of the people was a very high-ranking official in the French Interior Office, really a gendarme you would think of him, but he was a police official, National Police Force, and he came to the Oklahoma Mansion, and when he was leaving, he said, "I'm astonished. This is not what I thought I would see." He said, "This is so elegant. This is so professionally, wonderfully done. The food was superb. The service was great. The venue was outstanding." He said, this is not what I thought of as Oklahoma." And you guys, you and the governor sort of took us to a new level.
Well, doing the governor's mansion was not anything that you really choose to do. You
didn't have much choice.
I didn't have much choice.
It was empty and run down.
And it was, straight from Bob Vila. I don't know that anybody remembers who Bob Vila is, but he used to do This Old House. I guess it was the first reality TV kind of show back in the 1980s and 90s. And it just, public money is used to build public buildings, and then we don't allocate funds to take care of them, and so we build them to let them fall apart typically, and that's kind of what happened when we moved in. And I was just struck there was just no sense of history in that house when we moved in, and so few people live there, and so much history is made when those residents are there that it was really a wonderful challenge, a great opportunity to find different ways to put history back into the mansion. And you and I were talking before we started about our wonderful Native American heritage. And I look Native American. I know you're Native American.
I wish I had your coloring.
Well, and it's interesting. We're not sure that over time
You've got the eyes and cheekbones, and I'm not.
That there isn't. I did the swab and sent it in, and then got the information back that it really needs to be from the male side, and I haven't gotten my cousin to do the swab, who's closest to my maiden name, my father, who I think had to be Native American. My grandfather looked 100% Native American, but the times were such that no one talked about their heritage when he was growing up, and so none of that was ever passed down to us. We don't know, but anyway, I wanted to put our Native American heritage into the walls of the mansion because we were Indian Territory long before we were Oklahoma Territory, and yet the only thing we had, as you probably remember, were the 5 civilized tribe seals that were on the chairs, the dining room chairs, which had been needle appointed during the Edmondson administration, but just the 5 civilized tribes. And I thought, at the time we had 39 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma, we should have all 39 tribes at the table, and we should have them, embroidered in the rug of the entry hall. And so we really had fun figuring out different ways that we could put our heritage back into the mansion so that we could leave a legacy, and that the subsequent governors and their families could build on that legacy.
Well, you not only did that, and not to bring up a painful chapter in our past, but a lot of things disappeared out of that mansion over the years as different people moved in and out. And having brought it to really a fabulous status, to set up the Mansion Commission. Now, forgive me for not remembering the
Friends of
precise
the
name.
Mansion.
Friends of the Mansion, and taking a permanent inventory and having a board of governance, and you really institutionalized the care for the governor's mansion in Oklahoma in the way that the White House was institutionalized. That was a huge step forward for the state.
Well, it was the right thing to do. I'd like to tell you that I thought of that all by myself, but 38 states had done that prior to us. Jacqueline Kennedy started the White House Historical Society Association. Mm-hmm. So she could put permanence and bring back treasures that had been in the White House years before they arrived. And several states copied what they had done, and then by the time we came along, lots and lots of governor's mansions had already incorporated, formed nonprofits so that they could actually do that. So we had them to look to guide us and to tell us what worked and didn't work. And your partner at the time, Debbie Snodgrass, took a year of her life off, and she was joined at the hip with me in making that happen, and we had a lot of fun.
Well, you had something you did do though that nobody else had done, and I think this was your idea. Don't disillusion me if it wasn't. But the whole idea of putting all the governor's mansions into a single volume, it should never happen before. You would think, of course, something like that must be available, and then dedicating the profits to the upkeep of our mansion, which, again, you just, First Lady, you do. You have a visionary quality, and you know how to make things last. I mean, you're thinking about legacy and institutionalizing excellence, and it's a huge part of your legacy as a First Lady.
You're sweet. And that old saying, necessity's the mother of invention. And when I arrived at the mansion and there wasn't a blueprint of how to do this, I really actually went to the library and I called several bookstores, and there wasn't a book for me to look to see how other mansions had done this, and the internet wasn't as readily accessible or available to us back then. I'm really dating myself, but in 1995.
No, you're dating me. You look terrific. So,
but you just couldn't call that up on the internet to get that information. So we decided once our house looked better than everybody else's house, that would be the perfect time for me to do a book, and it really was out of necessity that I thought of that, because I thought, wouldn't it be nice if there were a volume for other governors and their families to I guess, review, call back on, and do kind of the Geish and Golly of the houses, not the people who lived there. And so we did.
Well,
it was great
of course,
fun.
you also did a book on the Oklahoma City bombing.
We
Tragedy
did.
was New York Times bestseller. Still is, readily available at the museum and on the internet. And again, as you always did, all the proceeds, in this case, dedicated to the victims. So
that's right. It was the right thing to do, and at the time, it was important that we tell our story from our perspective, and that was the whole point of doing that book. We didn't want somebody else to come in and rewrite history for us, because Oklahoma's a very special place, and I think the rest of the world got a bird's eye view after the Oklahoma City bombing when they saw, everybody responding the way that they did to such a terrible tragedy, and really, the heartland of America, which is now referred to as flyover country, really got its heart, I think, from the Oklahoma City bombing when the rest of the world saw us responding.
You had, at that moment, one of the key insights, and I've told this story in your presence before, and it's absolutely true. I remember, those were such dark days and hours immediately after, and we were having a meeting late at night at the governor's mansion, planning. We were still in the rescue mode, still thought there might be people alive, and certainly in the recovery mode, and you came into the meeting and said, we need to have a memorial service. And I remember looking at you and said, is this lady crazy? I mean, we are stretched to the limit. We're handling a disaster of national proportions. The whole world is watching this. I mean, how can this be done in this amount of time? And you prevailed and said, don't worry, I'll take care of everything myself. And I thought, okay. And 2 days later, I think, I wonder what's going on with this deal. It was on a Friday, and I decided you'd commandeered somehow the arena at the Oklahoma Fairgrounds, which I wondered, are we going to really get 8,000 people or whatever the capacity was, large, here? And then I thought, I wonder what's going on. I better go down and have a look. So I went down, and there were crews that were pulling up the turf on the deal and putting stuff up and bleacher and chairs and all this stuff. And I thought, who is paying for all this? And I went down to one of the crew and I said, just out of curiosity, how are you getting paid? And he looked, he was really visibly insulted. He said, what do you mean paid? That we're donating this. Everybody's donating this. Cathy Keating asked us to donate this. The next thing I know, Reverend Billy Graham is there. The President of the United States calls to ask, can he come too? And it really was. And when we showed up that morning, there were people a mile lined up outside there. And your sense of what needed to happen, everything down to teddy bears for people to hang on to, and the state, you were right, the state needed to grieve, the country needed to have a chance to honor what had happened there, both the victims and the first responders, and that was all you. That was your conception, and you're the one that made it happen.
Well, it took a lot of us working together. Took one person to get several people, but really 5 of us came together and put that on. And I should say we engineered it, because it took many more than 5. It took hundreds of people, but it was the right thing to do. And it really was the beginning, I think, of us healing. The beginning. It's been a long process as a state. Cute story, you mentioned the teddy bears. Brenda Edgar, who was then the First Lady of Illinois, called me early Thursday morning. As you remember, the bombing happened on Wednesday, and said she wanted to help, and she wanted to send teddy bears to the family who had lost a child, to the families who'd lost a child. And I kind of hesitated. I said, well, Brenda, I just don't think we can do that. I said, there are, first of all, we don't know how many families there are at this point. And secondly, there are lots of children who've lost parents and parents who've lost adult children. And I said, if we're going to do it for one, we really need to do for all. And she said, well, how many do you need? And I said, well, golly, I don't know, but we'll give them out at this prayer service that we're going to have on Sunday. And I said, if you can get them to me. And she said, well, how many do you need? So I just threw a number, I just pulled a number out of the air. Said, well, what if you sent me 250 teddy bears? And she said, okay. So the next day, all of a sudden, I got a phone call, and my security, we were down at the site, and my security said, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you, but there are 2 truckloads of beer waiting to go into the mansion, and where do you want the beer to go? Todd Lamb, who was Frank's assistant at the time,
Lieutenant Governor of the
now
state
the
of
Lieutenant
Oklahoma.
Governor of the state of Oklahoma, is standing there wanting to know what in the world you want to do with 2 truckloads, FedEx truckloads full of beer, and where in the world are we supposed to put them? And I went, beer? They said, yes, beer. And anyway, I said, well, look at the bill of lading. And it said, beer from Brenda Edgar. And I said, no, bears, teddy bears.
I had not heard that story.
It's a true story. And I said, well, they go in the garage for right now, but tomorrow we need to get them to the fairgrounds. And I think Todd Lamb must have been sitting there thinking, what in the world?
Finally lost it.
She's serving
cracked
beer at the memorial service? I don't even drink beer.
Yeah.
I know.
I know.
Our family does, but I don't.
Well, I can literally talk to you about your time as First Lady for our entire show, and we may get back to it. But I know our audience will be interested in the things that you've been doing since then, because you have stayed so incredibly active and involved in so many things professionally and philanthropically. So give our listeners a little bit of an update on what Cathy Keating's been up to.
Well, you're so sweet, Tom. A good segue from the bombing really to 2 of the things that Frank and I are involved in are the Red Cross and the Salvation Army, 2 very, very significant players in the recovery, the rescue and the recovery after the Oklahoma City bombing. And we really feel bonded for life to them for helping us in our greatest time of need. And there were lots and lots of other organizations and lots of people and corporations from not only the Oklahoma community, but from all across the world who helped us. But those two organizations were the first there, and they stayed long after everybody else had left. And the Salvation Army is going through a major relocation effort in Oklahoma City, and it's a forced relocation because of the interstate that's coming through. And so Frank and I are co-chairing their effort to help raise money for their relocation. We're at $9 million of the $12 million that we need to raise for them. And they're a wonderful organization, and it's a pleasure, it's an honor really for us to be involved in helping them with this relocation. And the American Red Cross is always the Johnny on the spot, not really just in times of crisis like this, but when there's a fire or there's a tornado, they're always Johnny on the spot there. And I haven't really been as involved in Oklahoma as I have been nationally, but Frank and I have co-chaired the national effort to make Washington, D.C. terrorist ready, because the Red Cross raises money after events, after the hurricanes or the tornadoes that come through, or after some, big event like the earthquake in Haiti. But they usually don't front load it with, raising money to get their facilities ready for a major terrorist event. And, Washington is a bullseye. And so we've been doing that for the last several years in a pretty significant way, raising money to get Washington ready for an event, because we don't want Washington to shut down. And they're first responders, just like the fire and the police are, by order of Congress, as a matter of fact. But they don't get money from Congress. They're privately funded. And then my most fun thing that I do, what I really, really love, where I'm spending most of my time, is with the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum. I was asked several years ago to be on their board of directors, and I'm the third woman on this board of 50 men. There are now 4 of us, and one of our other female members and I started an organization called the Annie Oakley Society.
Well, and just so our listeners know, you really are a real Annie Oakley. Most people don't know this about you, but I know when you fired your first shot and you brought down a deer at 300 yards.
Well,
and I think I still have in my house the picture with you and I think it was Janet Huckabee hunting rattlesnakes in southwest Oklahoma. It was a great spread in Sports Illustrated.
That's exactly
so,
right.
I mean, here's this elegant, beautiful, talented First Lady, and yet, she is Annie Oakley on the frontier with a rifle or going after snakes. I mean, it's part of you that I think, most people don't visualize you as a proud NRA member.
And I am indeed, and the only way I ever was going to get in Sports Illustrated was not in the swimsuit edition, but it was going to be doing something unique, like going after rattlesnakes in Mangum, Oklahoma, for the Rattlesnake Festival. And when I went deer hunting, it actually was supposed to be to learn about the problem that we were having in not only Oklahoma but nationwide with too many deer, and the wildlife department wanted me to see it firsthand, but they said you have to go learn how to shoot a rifle and get a license just in case. And I'll never forget, after I did that, I was in Ada. I think that's part of your district. And I was doing the Main Street Christmas parade, and somebody yelled at me, "You get him, Annie Oakley, great shot." And afterwards, a gentleman came up to me, and if he's listening, thank you very much, I really appreciate it. But he brought his wife saying, "I've been trying to get her to go hunting, and she just won't, because she said she just can't shoot Bambi." And I said, "Oh, but I didn't shoot Bambi." He said, "You didn't?" And I said, "No, I shot Bambi's no good two-timing dad." And she said, "Okay, I can go do that." So, Annie Oakley was a female hero to me growing up, and I don't know that the kids spend as much time learning about the Annie Oakleys of the world in history like we did back when I was a youngin'. But we started this organization because we feel like, truthfully, that the women's role in settling the West has really not been talked about as much as it should, or if it has been, it's not been talked about in the right vein. And women played such a significant role in settling our communities and taking care of the hearth and home, and allowing some of the men to go out there and fight the battles, so that that we could move westward in a positive, constructive way. And so it's a women's leadership organization. And Sandra Day O'Connor was our first honoree. And she's just
what a star!
A star, and a Westerner.
Yep.
We want to honor women who have done some significant first in their life, and of course, no better woman than Sandra to be first. Reba will be our second honoree this year, and of course, she is an entrepreneur, the most decorated female country and Western singer. She has a clothing line. She's charitable, philanthropic, is a producer. She's just, there's nothing she can't do. And all monies raised go to children's programming at the museum, and we're really, really working hard to totally reinvigorate children, because if they don't learn firsthand the love of the West, we'll lose them. So we're really, really working hard. We have a really exciting announcement. We're going to do something that's not been done anywhere else in the world at the museum. And we're announcing it in June at the luncheon, but it's for children. And so it's an exciting place to be. And if we don't know where we've been, we can't know where we're going. So we want to keep our heritage alive, both the cowboy and the Indian, the Native American heritage alive, because it was the settling of the West involved both.
It did. Absolutely did. We're winding down to about a minute and a half or so, but I'd be remiss not to let you, as a famous author in your own right and a New York Times bestseller, give a little plug for the struggling author in the family, the governor, who's now out with yet another book. And who would have thought of Frank Keating as literally a marvelous children's book author who's done some spectacular things?
Well, I'd like to think that I played a role in getting him to write Will Rogers, which was his first book, and partnered with Mike Wimmer, wonderful Oklahoma talent artist, great guy, and played a significant role in getting him to write his third book on Standing Bear, which was the story and the chief of the Ponca Indian tribe, which had not really been told in our history books. Theodore was his second one, on Theodore Roosevelt, and he just came out with George, on George Washington. And he loves writing children's book. He loves history like you do. And Abraham's next, and then Thomas Jefferson.
There we go. Well, First Lady, you make 30 minutes go pretty fast. And I'd be remiss not to thank you for all you've done. I mean, you just have been absolutely, from a state standpoint, a wonderful leader, a contributor, nationally significant, and a wonderful friend. And it was a great honor in my life to get to work for you and for the governor in a critical and wonderful time in Oklahoma history.
And you're a great friend, and it's been an honor to work with you and now for you, as you're a congressman, and you're a great representative for our state and for our nation. And I thank you for your service and your friendship.
Thank you very much. That's got it. Oh, always a pleasure.